I want you to stop what you're doing right now and listen closely to what I'm about to tell you. Because what I'm going to share with you tonight has the power to completely transform everything about your life in ways you cannot yet imagine. If you're watching this right now, it's not an accident. There are no accidents. You were drawn here by something deeper than curiosity, something that lives in the center of your being that knows, truly knows, that your life is meant to be so much more than what you've been settling for. And I'm here to tell you that you're absolutely right. You didn't stumble upon this message. This message found you because you're ready. You're ready to step into the greatest year of your entire life. And everything, absolutely everything, is about to change if you can open your heart to what I'm going to reveal to you. I know you're tired. I know you've been carrying burdens that make your shoulders ache and your spirit feel heavy. I know you've been disappointed before, that you've hoped and prayed and tried and failed, and maybe you're sitting here right now with just the tiniest flicker of hope left, wondering if anything will ever truly change. Let me tell you something that will shock you. That flicker of hope inside you right now is not small at all. It's the most powerful force in the entire universe, and it brought you here to this exact moment because you are meant to hear these words. Your life has been preparing you for this awakening. Every single struggle, every tear, every moment you thought you couldn't go on, it was all leading you here, to right now, where everything shifts. I've spent my life studying the invisible laws that govern this universe. The ones that most people never learn about because they're so busy looking at the visible world, the world of problems and limitations and fear. But there's another world, a world of infinite possibility, a world where everything you've ever wanted is already yours, just waiting for you to claim it. And in 2026, if you truly listen to what I'm sharing with you, you will finally step through the veil into that world. This isn't wishful thinking. This isn't fantasy. This is law. This is truth. And it works whether you believe it or not, but when you do believe it, when you align yourself with these principles, miracles become your daily bread. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through the most important spiritual principles I've discovered in my decades of work. Principles that have transformed thousands of lives, principles that the universe itself operates on. I'm going to tell you stories that will break your heart open and then fill it with light. I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do, not in some distant future, but starting tonight, right now, to make 2026 the year that changes everything. And I promise you, if you stay with me, if you let these words sink deep into your soul, you will never be the same person again. You're about to remember who you really are. You're about to remember what you came here to do. And you're about to discover that the power you've been searching for outside of yourself has been living inside you all along, just waiting for you to wake up and use it. Let me start by telling you something that might sound strange at first, but I need you to really hear this. Your life right now, everything in it, every circumstance, every relationship, every dollar in your bank account or not in your bank account, every bit of it is not happening to you. It's happening through you. You created it all with your words, with your thoughts, with your beliefs about what you deserve and what's possible. Now, before you get defensive, before you say, "But Florence, you don't understand. This terrible thing happened to me. I didn't choose this," let me be crystal clear. I'm not saying you consciously chose every event. I'm saying that the consciousness you've been walking around with, the beliefs you've been holding, the words you've been speaking, they have been creating your reality with absolute precision. And here's the beautiful, incredible, life-changing truth. If you created this reality, you can create a different one. Most people are walking around asleep, completely unconscious of the creative power they wield every single day with their thoughts and words. They speak lack, and they wonder why they're poor. They speak sickness, and they wonder why they're ill. They speak about how difficult relationships are, and they wonder why love eludes them. They're like someone planting thistle seeds and standing there confused about why roses aren't growing. Your word is your wand. That's what I've been teaching for years, and it's the most important thing you'll ever learn. Every word you speak is a decree, a command to the universe. And the universe, which is nothing but infinite possibility waiting to take form, says yes to whatever you decree. It doesn't judge whether your decree is good for you or bad for you. It just says yes. It just creates. And it creates exactly what you speak, what you believe, what you expect. I remember working with a woman once who came to me absolutely desperate. She'd been trying for years to meet the right partner, to find love, to have the relationship she dreamed about. And every time she met someone, it would fall apart in the same painful way. She was convinced something was wrong with her, that she was broken, that love just wasn't meant for her. So I asked her to tell me about her relationships, and as she spoke, I started to hear it. She kept saying things like, "Men always disappoint me. Every time I trust someone, they leave. I'm too much for people. Nobody can handle me. Love never works out for me." And there it was. She was speaking her reality into existence with every word. She was literally commanding the universe to bring her disappointing men, to bring her people who would leave, to prove her right that love never works out. When I pointed this out to her, she was stunned. She had no idea she was doing it. She thought she was just describing her experience, just telling the truth about what had happened. But here's what most people don't understand. When you describe your past painful experiences over and over, when you claim them as your truth, you're not just talking about what happened, you're creating what will happen. You're placing an order with the universe for more of the same. So, I taught her something that changed everything. I taught her to speak the word for what she wanted, not what she had. I taught her to say, "My right relationship now manifests. The perfect partner finds me easily and effortlessly. I am loved, cherished, and adored." She resisted at first. It felt like lying. She said, "But Florence, I can't say that. It's not true. I haven't met him yet." And I told her, "That's exactly why you need to say it. You speak the word to create the thing, not after the thing appears." She started practicing this, and at first it felt awkward and fake, but she kept going. She stopped telling her stories of heartbreak. When friends asked about her love life, instead of launching into the familiar narrative of disappointment, she would simply say, "I'm preparing to meet my perfect partner." She wrote affirmations and spoke them every morning and every night. She trained her mind to expect love instead of expecting disappointment. And something remarkable happened. Within 3 months, she met a man at a completely random event, someone who treated her with a kindness and respect she'd never experienced before. Within a year, they were married. And when she came to thank me, she said something I'll never forget. She said, "Florence, I realize now that he was always there, waiting for me to become the person who could receive him. I had to change my consciousness before he could appear in my life." That's how this works. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. You attract what you believe. You attract what you speak. And if you want 2026 to be the best year of your life, you have to become, right now, the person who lives that best life. You have to start speaking like that person, thinking like that person, expecting like that person. You can't wait for your circumstances to change, and then you'll be happy, and then you'll speak positively. It doesn't work that way. You have to speak the word first, and then the circumstances must change to match your word. This is law. This is how creation works. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You are made in the image and likeness of that creative power, which means your word has that same creative power. You just have to wake up and use it consciously, deliberately, purposefully. Now, I know some of you are thinking, this sounds too simple. If it were really this easy, everyone would be doing it. But simple doesn't mean easy. The reason most people never access this power is because they won't discipline their thoughts and their words. They won't take responsibility for their consciousness. It's easier to blame circumstances, to blame other people, to blame the economy or their childhood or bad luck. Taking responsibility for your consciousness means admitting that you have been participating in creating your own suffering, and that's a hard pill to swallow. But the moment you swallow it, the moment you truly accept that you've been creating all of this, even the parts you don't like, in that same moment you discover that you have the power to create something completely different. You're not a victim. You never were. You're a creator who forgot you were creating. Let me share another story with you, because I want you to really feel this truth in your bones. There was a man who came to see me, and he was in financial ruin. He'd lost his business, he was drowning in debt, and he was terrified he was going to lose his home. He was bitter, angry, and completely focused on everything that was wrong. When he talked, every sentence was about lack and fear and limitation. "I don't have enough money. I can't pay my bills. Nobody will hire me. The economy is terrible. I'm going to end up on the street." On and on and on. And I sat there listening, and I could feel the heavy, dark energy of all those words. He was wrapping himself in a blanket of lack with every syllable he spoke. I said to him, "You're bankrupt in consciousness before you're bankrupt in the bank. Your outer world is just reflecting your inner world." He didn't like that. He got defensive. He wanted to tell me all the reasons why it wasn't his fault, all the external circumstances that had caused his problems. And I let him talk until he was empty. Then I said, "Are you finished? Because everything you just said is a story you're telling, and that story is creating more of what you don't want. If you want a different life, you need a different story." I taught him what I'm teaching you now. I taught him to bless his finances, even when they looked terrible. I taught him to give thanks for money, even when he felt like he had none. I taught him to say, "Infinite abundance is my divine right. Money flows to me easily and constantly from expected and unexpected sources. I am a child of the universe, and the universe is infinitely abundant." He thought I was crazy. He said, "How can I be grateful for money when I'm broke?" And I explained to him that he wasn't being grateful for being broke. He was being grateful for the money that was on its way to him, the money that was already his in the invisible realm, waiting for him to call it forth with his faith and his word. I told him about the time I needed money urgently and had no idea where it would come from, and I simply spoke the word, "Infinite Spirit, open the way for my immediate supply. Let all that is mine by divine right now reach me in great avalanches of abundance." Within days, money came to me from a source I never could have predicted, money I didn't even know was owed to me. He decided to try it. What did he have to lose? He started changing his language. When he caught himself saying, "I can't afford that," he would stop and say instead, "I don't choose to spend my money on that right now, but I am abundantly supplied." When he caught himself worrying about bills, he would stop and say, "All my bills are paid. I have more than enough for everything I need." He started to bless his mailbox instead of dreading it. He started to look for evidence of abundance everywhere, noticing the free cup of coffee a friend bought him, the sunset that cost nothing, the abundance of air in his lungs. He shifted his attention from lack to abundance, and his consciousness began to change. And then the miracles started. A former colleague called him out of the blue with a consulting opportunity. Someone who owed him money from years ago suddenly paid him back. He found a bank error in his favor. None of these things were coincidences. They were the universe responding to his changed consciousness. Within 6 months, he was not only out of debt, he was thriving in a new business that excited him more than anything he'd ever done before. When he came back to see me, he was a completely different man. The bitterness was gone. The fear was gone. He understood the law now. He understood his power. These stories aren't special cases. They're examples of how universal law works for everyone, all the time. The law doesn't play favorites. It responds to your faith, to your word, to your consciousness. If you've been living a life of lack, speaking words of limitation, dwelling in fear and doubt, then the law has been faithfully reproducing that in your experience. But here's the miraculous truth. The moment you change your word, the moment you shift your consciousness, the law begins working in the opposite direction with the same precision, the same power, the same unwavering consistency. I've watched this transformation happen in the most unlikely circumstances. A woman came to me, drowning in debt, creditors at her door, not a penny to her name. But instead of rehearsing her poverty, instead of telling everyone who would listen about her desperate situation, she began to speak differently. Every morning, she declared, "God is my unfailing supply. Every need is met before I even ask. I am surrounded by infinite abundance." At first, these words felt foreign on her tongue, almost absurd given her circumstances. But she persisted. She refused to go back to the old conversation of lack. Within weeks, money began flowing to her from the most unexpected sources. An old investment she'd forgotten about matured. A relative remembered a small loan and repaid it with interest. Work opportunities appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Within 6 months, every debt was cleared, and she had savings for the first time in years. The outer world simply rearranged itself to match her inner declaration. You see, your word is not just sound vibrating in the air. Your word carries consciousness, it carries conviction, it carries creative power. When you speak with faith, with knowing, with absolute certainty, You set spiritual law into motion, as surely as dropping a stone sets the law of gravity into motion. There's nothing mystical or vague about this. It's precise, it's scientific, it's law. But here's where most people stumble. They speak the right words with their mouths, while their hearts are singing a completely different tune. They affirm abundance while secretly believing in lack. They declare health while nursing mental images of disease. They claim success while rehearsing failure in their imagination, and they wonder why nothing changes. The imagination is your creative workshop, and you must guard what you allow to be manufactured there. Most people permit their imagination to run wild, producing worry, fear, and catastrophe without any conscious direction. They create elaborate scenarios of loss, rejection, and failure, then act surprised when these very things materialize in their lives. I've watched this pattern repeat endlessly. A woman imagines her husband's unfaithfulness, rehearses confrontations that haven't happened, and pictures herself abandoned. Within months, the very thing she feared comes to pass. Did she predict the future? No, she created it. Her persistent mental images set forces in motion that attracted precisely what she feared most. The law works both ways with perfect precision. Just as negative imagination creates negative results, directed imagination creates positive results. But here's what most people miss. You cannot force your imagination. You cannot grip it with mental effort and strain. That produces tension, and tension blocks your good. Instead, you must learn to plant your desired images gently, consistently, lovingly. See yourself as you wish to be. Picture circumstances as you desire them to unfold. But do it playfully, with the light touch of a child daydreaming, not with the desperate clutching of someone drowning. I knew a man buried in debt who transformed his circumstances entirely through reimagining his relationship with money. Instead of picturing bills and collection notices, he began to imagine checks arriving in the mail. He saw himself paying obligations easily, with money left over. He practiced feeling grateful for abundance before it arrived. Within 6 months, unexpected sources of income appeared. An old debt was repaid. A forgotten investment yielded returns. His outer world reorganized itself to match his inner imagery. This isn't fantasy. This is mechanics. Your subconscious mind cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you repeatedly picture yourself healthy, prosperous, and fulfilled, your subconscious accepts these images as orders and begins arranging circumstances to match them. But, and this is crucial, you must combine imagination with words that align. You cannot picture abundance while speaking poverty. You cannot imagine health while your conversation centers on symptoms. Your words must support your images, and your images must reflect your words. This is why affirmations without alignment feel hollow. You've likely encountered someone who repeats positive statements while their entire demeanor contradicts every word. The affirmation becomes a mask, not a transformation. True spiritual work requires that you bring your whole self into agreement. Your words, your mental pictures, your emotional state, your expectations. I once worked with a woman whose business was failing. She would say to me, "I affirm abundance daily, but nothing changes." When I asked her to describe what she saw when she closed her eyes and thought of her business, she painted a picture of empty rooms, unopened mail, and creditors at her door. Her affirmation was a thin layer of paint over a condemned building. We had to demolish that old image entirely before we could construct something new. Here's what I told her, and what I tell you now. You must become ruthless with your imagination. Guard it as you would guard a sacred temple. When a negative image appears, and it will appear, for the subconscious is stubborn and familiar patterns die hard, you must immediately replace it. Not suppress it, not fight it. Replace it. This is not denial. Some confuse this work with pretending problems don't exist. But there's a profound difference between denying reality and refusing to give it permanence in your consciousness. You acknowledge what is, and then you turn your full attention to what can be. The problem exists in the visible realm, yes, but the solution exists in the invisible realm, waiting for you to claim it through vision. I knew a man whose body was racked with illness. The doctors offered little hope, but this man understood the power of mental imagery. Each day, he would see himself well, not as a distant hope, but as present fact. He saw himself walking without pain. He saw himself eating with appetite. He saw himself laughing with strength in his lungs. He did not see these things and think, Someday, perhaps, he saw them and felt, this is the truth of my being. The physical symptoms remained for some time. This is where most people falter. They plant the seed of the new image, but when the conditions don't shift immediately, they dig up the seed to check if it's growing. They return to the old picture out of impatience or fear. But this man held steady. He watered his vision with faith and patience. And in time, not overnight, but in right timing, his body reflected what his imagination had already accepted as true. Now here's what most people get wrong about this process. They treat visualization like a slot machine. They pull the lever once, twice, maybe 100 times, and when nothing immediately appears, they walk away muttering that it doesn't work. But imagination isn't a slot machine, it's a garden. You don't plant a seed and stand there with your arms crossed, tapping your foot, demanding results by sunset. You plant it with intention. You water it with faith. You protect it from the weeds of doubt. And you trust the intelligence of the soil to do what soil does, transform a tiny seed into something magnificent. Florence understood this deeply. She knew that the moment you plant the seed of an idea in consciousness, the invisible machinery of the universe begins to move. But that machinery operates on divine timing, not your anxious timeline. I've watched people give up on their dreams 3 days before the breakthrough. 3 days. They were so close they could have reached out and touched it, but they blinked. They let doubt slip in through the back door, and it poisoned everything they'd been building. Listen carefully. Your imagination doesn't need you to figure out the how. Your job isn't to micromanage the universe. Your job is to hold the vision steady and let divine intelligence arrange the circumstances. There was a woman who came to one of Florence's lectures, broken by financial struggle. She had $20 to her name and rent due in a week. Every logical voice in her head screamed that she was finished. But Florence told her something radical. She said, "Give thanks now for your financial freedom. See yourself paying that rent with ease. Feel the relief in your body as if it's already done." The woman looked at her like she'd suggested sprouting wings and flying to the moon. But something in Florence's certainty reached past her fear. She went home and did exactly as instructed. She sat in her tiny apartment, closed her eyes, and let herself feel what it would be like to be financially secure. She didn't know where the money would come from. She couldn't see a single logical path. But she held that feeling. 3 days later, she received a letter. An aunt she barely knew had passed away and left her a small inheritance. Not a fortune, but enough to cover her rent and give her breathing room to rebuild. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe she aligned herself with a frequency that the universe could finally match. The universe doesn't respond to your desperation. It responds to your certainty. Think about how a child asks for something they truly believe they'll receive. There's no anxiety in it, no backup plan. They simply ask and then go about their day, fully expecting it to arrive. That's the state you're aiming for. Not the frantic energy of wanting, but the calm assurance of knowing. I've watched people sabotage their own manifestations at the 11th hour because they couldn't hold the frequency. They'd done everything right, visualized, affirmed, aligned, and then, just as the thing was about to materialize, they'd panic. They'd start questioning. They'd look at their bank account or their empty apartment or their silent phone and decide it wasn't working. And in that moment of doubt, they'd slam the door shut on everything that was coming toward them. The universe was delivering. They just stopped receiving. Here's what most people don't understand about manifesting. It's not a one-time declaration. It's a sustained vibration. You can't affirm abundance on Monday and then spend Tuesday through Sunday complaining about bills. You can't visualize your ideal partner and then spend your evenings scrolling through social media, bitter about everyone else's relationships. The universe reads your dominant frequency, not your occasional hopeful thought. I knew someone who wanted to travel the world but couldn't afford it. Every conversation somehow circled back to money, how expensive flights were, how impossible it all seemed, how only rich people got to do things like that. She was literally talking herself out of the very thing she claimed to want. Her words were casting a spell, and it wasn't the kind that opens doors. One day, I asked her to try something different. For 30 days, speak only as if the travel was already handled. Not, I wish I could go to Italy, but I'm so excited about my upcoming trip. Not, I can't afford that, but I'm open to unexpected opportunities. Just change the language. See what happens. 3 weeks in, a former colleague reached out about a travel writing opportunity. Expenses covered. 6 countries over 3 months. The opportunity had always existed, she just hadn't been vibrationally available for it until she changed her frequency. Your words are not just sounds you make, they're incantations. They're programming your subconscious mind and broadcasting your signal to the universe. Every time you say, I can't, you're giving an instruction. Every time you say, I am, you're claiming an identity. Think about what you've been saying about yourself lately. Not just out loud, but in your head, in that constant internal dialogue that runs from morning until night. I'm always broke. I'm terrible with money. Nothing ever works out for me. I'm just unlucky in love. These aren't casual observations. They're declarations of identity. They're contracts you're signing with the universe, agreements you're entering into with reality itself. And here's what makes this so powerful, so absolutely critical to understand. The universe doesn't judge your words as complaints or jokes or exaggerations. It receives them as orders. It treats them as truth. It says, oh, you're always broke? Let me make sure that continues to be your experience. You're terrible with money? I'll arrange circumstances to confirm that belief. This is why someone can work incredibly hard, put in twice the effort of others, and still struggle financially, while someone else seems to effortlessly attract abundance. It's not about the action alone. It's about the energetic instruction being broadcast while taking that action. You can work 14-hour days, but if you're working those hours while thinking, I have to work this hard because I'm not smart enough to make money easily, or I'll never get ahead, you're broadcasting lack while textile do, performing the actions of abundance. And the universe responds to the broadcast, not the behavior. I've watched people sabotage incredible opportunities because their internal dialogue didn't match the opportunity being presented. They'd say things like, this is too good to be true, or someone like me doesn't get chances like this. And within days or weeks, the opportunity would mysteriously fall apart. Not because it wasn't real, not because they weren't qualified, but because their words created an energetic environment that couldn't sustain the blessing. Your words are creating your atmosphere. They're establishing the conditions under which you live. And just like a plant can't thrive in toxic soil no matter how much sunlight it gets, your dreams can't flourish in an atmosphere poisoned by negative declaration. So how do we change the atmosphere? How do we shift from that heavy, doubt-filled air into something that feels light, expectant, full of possibility? We begin by becoming conscious of our words. Radically conscious. You'd be amazed at how much we speak on autopilot, letting phrases slip out without any awareness of what we're actually declaring over our lives. Start noticing, when something goes wrong, what's your immediate verbal reaction? Do you say, of course this happened to me, or I never get a break, or this is just my luck? These aren't harmless expressions of frustration. They're commands. They're instructions you're giving to the universe about what to send your way next. I had a student once who couldn't understand why financial struggle followed her everywhere. She had skills, she worked hard, she made good decisions. But every single day, multiple times a day, she'd say, I can't afford it. She said it about everything. Someone would invite her to dinner. Oh, I can't afford it. A dress she admired in a window. I can't afford it. Even things that cost $5, things well within her budget, she'd automatically respond with those 4 words. She wasn't stating facts. She was stating faith. Faith in poverty. Faith in limitation, and the universe, always faithful to our faith, kept proving her right. When she finally became aware of this pattern, she was shocked. She hadn't realized how constantly she was affirming lack. So we worked together to shift it. Instead of, I can't afford it, she began saying, I'm choosing to use my resources elsewhere right now, or simply, that's not for me. Do you see the difference? One is a declaration of powerlessness. The other is a statement of choice and discernment. Within weeks, her entire financial situation began to shift. Not because the words were magic, but because the words reflected a change in consciousness. She stopped identifying as someone who couldn't afford things and began identifying as someone who made empowered choices about her resources. The universe responded to that new identity. This is why I'm so insistent about the specific words we use. It's not about positive thinking as some kind of naive denial. It's about aligning our words with the truth of what we want to create, rather than with the evidence of what currently is. Because here's what I've observed, time and time again. The universe doesn't respond to what you think you deserve based on your past. It doesn't care about your resume of failures or your catalog of mistakes. It responds to the vibration you're sending out right now, in this present moment, through your words and your feelings. I had a woman come to me once who had been in debt for years. Deep, crushing debt that seemed to multiply no matter what she did. And every time she opened her mouth, what came out? I'll never get out of this hole. Money just slips through my fingers. I'm terrible with finances. She was speaking her financial prison into existence every single day, reinforcing the bars with every utterance. I told her, stop. Every time you're about to speak those words, catch yourself. Instead, say, I am under grace, and money comes to me easily and effortlessly. Say it even when your bank statement says otherwise. Say it especially then. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but she was desperate enough to try, and within months, not years, months, unexpected money began appearing. A forgotten tax refund. A small inheritance from a distant relative she barely knew. A job opportunity that doubled her income. Were these miracles? Or were they simply the natural result of her changing the signal she was broadcasting to the universe? You see, when you declare I am prosperous, you're not lying to yourself. You're stating a spiritual truth that exists beyond your current circumstances. You are, in your essential nature, connected to infinite abundance. The only thing blocking that abundance from manifesting in your physical reality is your own contradictory words and beliefs. This is why I tell people, become the guardian of your own gateway. Your mouth is the gateway between the invisible and the visible. Every word is either opening that gate wider or slamming it shut. And most people walk around all day, casually slamming the gate on their own good, not even realizing what they're doing. Think about the phrase, I'm just being realistic. How many times have you heard that? How many times have you said it yourself? It's usually said with a kind of pride, as if pessimism were a form of wisdom. But what does realistic even mean? It means conforming to what has been. It means accepting the past as the template for the future. It means surrendering your creative power to the tyranny of current circumstances. But here's what I discovered in my years of metaphysical work, and what I've witnessed in the lives of countless students who came to me broken and desperate. The universe does not respect your so-called realism. It does not bow to your careful assessments of probability. It does not applaud your sensible limitations. The universe responds to one thing, and one thing only, the quality of your consciousness. I once worked with a woman whose husband had left her penniless. She came to me with a list, literally a written list of all the reasons she could never recover financially. She was too old to start over. She had no education. She had no connections. She had 3 children to feed. She had debts she couldn't possibly repay. Her realism was impeccable. Her faith was non-existent. I said to her, what I'm saying to you now, your good is not dependent on conditions. Your supply does not come from circumstances. Your demonstration comes from consciousness. She looked at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. But something in her, some small, forgotten spark, responded. She began to work with affirmations of abundance. She began to declare, against all visible evidence, that her supply was endless and immediate. Within 6 months, she had inherited a property from a distant relative she hadn't spoken to in decades. Within a year, she had turned that property into a thriving business. Within 2 years, she was teaching other women how to reclaim their financial power. Was this luck? Coincidence? The skeptic would say yes, and in saying so, would close the door to their own demonstration. But I tell you this, that woman changed her consciousness first. The outer change followed the inner transformation. The universe rearranged itself to match her new mental equivalent. This is not fantasy. This is spiritual law. And yet, how many of you are sitting right now in circumstances you've accepted as permanent? How many of you have made peace with limitation? How many of you have become so reasonable, so realistic, so practical that you've forgotten you're a divine being with infinite creative power? You've become a participant in your own imprisonment. You've become the warden of your own cell. And here's what's truly tragic. You've convinced yourself that this imprisonment is safety, that this limitation is wisdom. You call it being realistic when it's actually a slow death of your imagination. You call it being mature when it's actually surrendering to mediocrity. I watch people defend their limitations with more passion than they ever defended their dreams. They'll spend hours explaining why something can't be done, why it won't work, why they're not ready, why the timing is wrong. They become lawyers for their own defeat, building case after case against their own success. But you were never meant to live like this. Your imagination wasn't given to you as a toy to be put away when you became an adult. It was given to you as the most powerful creative tool in the universe. It is literally God's gift to you, the mechanism through which the infinite becomes finite, the invisible becomes visible, the possible becomes actual. When you imagine something, you're not just daydreaming. You're not wasting time. You're engaging in the most sacred act of creation available to a human being. You're using the same power that spoke worlds into existence, that separated light from darkness, that breathed life into form. But you've been taught to apologize for it. Oh, I'm just imagining things. As if imagination were something lesser, something frivolous, something to be embarrassed about. No, you should say it with pride. I am imagining things. I am using my divine creative power. I am shaping reality through the force of my consciousness. Every single thing you see around you right now, every building, every device, every piece of clothing, every system and structure began as an imagination in someone's mind. The chair you're sitting on, the device you're watching this on, the room you're in, all of it was once invisible, residing only in the realm of imagination. This means that imagination is not escapism. It is not fantasy. It is not daydreaming without purpose. Imagination is the preview room of your coming attractions. It is the workshop where God creates through you. It is the bridge between the invisible and the visible, between spirit and matter, between what is and what shall be. And here's where most people completely misunderstand this power. They think imagination is passive. They think it's just pictures floating through their mind with no real consequence. But I'm telling you, imagination is the most active force in your life. Your imagination is working right now, this very moment. It never stops. Even when you sleep, it continues its creative work through your dreams. The question is not whether you're using your imagination. The question is, what are you imagining? Are you imagining success or failure, health or sickness, abundance or lack, love or loneliness? Because whatever you persistently imagine, you are bringing into form. I've watched people imagine their way into poverty by constantly picturing themselves struggling. I've seen them imagine their way into sickness by dwelling on every symptom and imagining the worst outcome. I've witnessed relationships destroyed because someone kept imagining betrayal and abandonment. But I've also witnessed miracles. I knew a woman who was told she would never have children. The doctors gave her every medical reason why it was impossible. But this woman understood spiritual law. Every night before sleep, she would close her eyes and imagine holding her baby. She could feel the weight of the child in her arms. She could smell that sweet baby scent. She could hear the soft breathing. She lived in that feeling. And within a year, against all medical predictions, she held that exact baby in her arms. Was it the imagining that created the child? No. It was the fact that her imagination aligned her consciousness with the divine pattern that was already established for her in the spiritual realm. Her imagination became the magnet that drew the invisible into the visible. This is how you use the law of substitution with imagination. When fear knocks at your door with images of disaster, you don't fight the fear. You simply substitute a different image. You replace the picture of failure with the picture of success. You replace the vision of sickness with the vision of perfect health. This is not a matter of denying what exists. When you're looking at an empty bank account, I'm not asking you to pretend the numbers aren't real. When you're feeling pain in your body, I'm not suggesting you ignore genuine symptoms. What I'm teaching you is something far more powerful. You're choosing which reality you're going to energize with your attention, your emotion, your faith. The physical world is always the last to know. It's the final station where your thoughts arrive after they've traveled through the invisible realms of consciousness. By the time something appears in your material circumstances, it's already old news. It's the result of thinking you did weeks, months, sometimes years ago. So when you look at your present conditions and feel discouraged, understand this. You're looking at yesterday's thoughts made manifest. You're reading last season's newspaper. Your work now is to write today's headlines. Your work now is to impress upon your subconscious mind the images that match your heart's true desires. I knew a woman who came to me desperate about her financial situation. Her business was failing, creditors were circling, and everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of her impending ruin. "I can't help but see it," she told me. "It's everywhere I turn. How can I possibly imagine abundance when lack is staring me in the face?" I said to her, "Your outer eye sees lack, that's true. But you have an inner eye, and that eye can see whatever you direct it to see. Begin to see yourself prosperous. See your business thriving. See checks arriving. See yourself paying every bill with ease and gratitude." She protested, as so many do. "But that's just fantasy. That's not real." And I replied, "Which is more real, the temporary condition that's shifting and changing every moment, or the eternal truth that God's abundance is infinite and available to all who claim it? You've been fantasizing failure for months. You've been imagining disaster with such vivid detail that you've brought it right to your doorstep. Now, you're simply going to fantasy success with the same commitment." She began the practice reluctantly, but she began. Every morning and every evening, she would sit quietly and construct detailed mental pictures of her business flourishing. She saw customers coming through her doors. She heard the telephone ringing with new orders. She felt the relief and joy of depositing money into her account. Within 3 weeks, something shifted. A major opportunity arrived not through her old contacts, but through someone completely unexpected. A client she had worked with 2 years prior, someone she'd almost forgotten about, reached out with a significant project. The money she needed arrived, not as a trickle, but as a wave. This is what I mean when I say the universe has 1,000 ways to reach you. You only need to provide one clear opening through faith. But here's where most people stumble again. They receive their demonstration, they celebrate for a moment, and then immediately they slip back into the old consciousness of lack. They think, "Well, that was lucky, but what about next month?" And the wheel of worry begins spinning once more. True mastery means understanding that this principle is not a one-time event. It's not about getting lucky. It's about establishing yourself in a consciousness of permanent supply. You must come to know, deep in your bones, that abundance is your natural state. I've watched people demonstrate one success after another, yet remain inwardly anxious. They're like someone standing in a river, dying of thirst. The supply is all around them, flowing constantly, but they haven't learned to drink. The ancient wisdom tells us that we live and move and have our being in an infinite ocean of substance. This isn't poetry. This isn't metaphor meant to comfort you. This is literal truth about the nature of reality. Every atom of the universe responds to consciousness. Your word, spoken with faith and understanding, sets invisible forces into motion. You are not begging a distant deity for favors. You are activating a law as precise as gravity, as dependable as mathematics. When you say, "My supply comes from God, and now appears in perfect divine order," you're not making a wish. You're stating a fact that the universe must honor. You're reminding yourself of what's already true. I knew a man who transformed his entire life through one single realization. For years, he had struggled with poverty consciousness. He worked hard, saved carefully, yet never seemed to get ahead. There was always an unexpected bill, always an emergency that drained his resources. One day, after studying these principles, something clicked for him. He realized he had been living from a belief in limited supply, the idea that there was only so much to go around, and he had to fight for his share. He began a new practice. Every morning, he spoke aloud, "Infinite Spirit, open the way for my right work, my right wealth, my right home. Give me a definite lead, and let me know if there's anything for me to do." He didn't beg. He didn't plead. He simply stated his claim with quiet authority, as one might order from a menu in a fine restaurant. Within weeks, opportunities appeared that had been invisible to him before: a business contact, a chance meeting, a door opening where there had seemed to be only wall. The universe had been waiting for him to change his inner conversation. You see, most people think manifestation is about vision boards and affirmations alone, but those are merely tools. The real work is the subtraction, removing the false beliefs that contradict your good. It's not about adding more faith. It's about removing the doubt that blocks what already wants to reach you. I worked with a woman who had been chronically ill for years. Doctors found nothing wrong, yet she suffered. When we explored her thought life, we discovered she had been carrying a deep resentment toward her sister for over a decade. That resentment had calcified into a physical condition, her body literally bearing the weight of unforgiveness. I told her what I tell you now. Resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It's a form of self-destruction masked as moral superiority. She resisted at first. But I was wronged, she insisted. My sister doesn't deserve forgiveness. Forgiveness, I explained, isn't about what anyone deserves. It's about what you deserve: freedom, health, peace. Every moment you hold on to that grievance, you're volunteering for continued suffering. We began a daily practice. She would say, I fully and freely forgive my sister. I release this situation to divine love. I am free and she is free. At first, the words felt hollow, even dishonest, but she persisted. Within 3 months, her symptoms began to diminish. Within 6, they had disappeared entirely. Her sister never changed, never apologized, but she was healed because she withdrew her energy from the old story. This is what I call the sovereignty of self. You do not need anyone else to change for you to be free. You do not need apologies. You do not need admissions of wrongdoing. You do not need closure handed to you like a certificate. You are the one who closes the door. You are the one who opens the new one. And here's what's extraordinary: when you truly release someone from your mental court, when you stop needing them to be different, something shifts in the invisible realm. Not always, but often, the external relationship transforms too. Not because you manipulated it, but because you stopped feeding the old pattern with your resistance. I once knew a businessman who had been betrayed by his partner. For 2 years, he rehearsed his anger daily. He told the story to anyone who would listen. He consulted lawyers obsessively, not because he needed legal advice anymore, but because he needed to keep the wound fresh. His business suffered. His health declined. He aged visibly. One day, someone asked him, "How long are you willing to pay this price?" He stopped cold. He realized he had been tithing his life force to resentment. That very week, he began a different practice. Each morning, he said, I release this man completely. I call back all energy I have given to this situation. I am free, and he is free. He continued with the necessary legal proceedings. This wasn't about being passive, but he stopped the internal prosecution. Within weeks, the case settled favorably. But more importantly, he was already free before the settlement came. The outer resolution was just the confirmation of his inner work. This is the principle working through the visible and invisible simultaneously. You cannot control the visible directly. You cannot force outcomes, force apologies, force people to see what they've done. But you can command the invisible, your own consciousness, and the visible must eventually conform. Now, some of you are thinking, but what about justice? Are you saying we should just let people get away with harmful behavior? No. Justice and inner freedom are not opposed. You can stand for what's right, protect yourself, set consequences, and still not carry the poison internally. True justice comes from clarity, not vengeance. When you're no longer energetically entangled with the wrongdoer, you can act with precision. Your boundaries become clean. Your decisions become wise. You're not acting from the wounded child. You're acting from the sovereign self. You begin to see how much of your suffering wasn't caused by the absence of love, it was caused by the presence of tolerance. You tolerated the wrong voices. You tolerated the wrong energy in your space. You tolerated behavior that slowly eroded your sense of worthiness. And here's what's profound. The moment you stop tolerating what diminishes you, the universe stops sending it. Because the universe is always listening. It's always watching what you allow. And it gives you more of what you say yes to, not just with your words, but with your time, your attention, your silence, your presence. When you tolerated disrespect, you trained people to disrespect you. When you tolerated inconsistency, you trained them to show up carelessly. When you tolerated breadcrumbs, you told the universe, I'm a person who accepts crumbs. But now you're different. Now you know better. You understand that self-love isn't just affirmations in the mirror. It's not just bubble baths and journaling, though those are beautiful. Self-love is the boundary you hold when someone tries to guilt you into shrinking. Self-love is the no you speak when everything in you wants to be liked. Self-love is walking away from what feels good in the moment, but destroys you over time. This is where your power lives, not in controlling others, but in refusing to abandon yourself to keep them comfortable. I've watched people transform their entire lives by changing one thing. They stopped explaining themselves to people who were committed to misunderstanding them. They stopped defending their boundaries to those who had no intention of respecting them. They stopped performing worthiness for an audience that would never applaud. And what happened? Space opened. Clarity came. The right people appeared not because they hunted for them, but because they became unavailable to the wrong ones. You see, you don't find your tribe by searching harder. You find them by becoming more yourself. You find them by honoring what's true in you, even when it isolates you temporarily. The right souls are drawn to authenticity like moths to flame. But first, you have to stop dimming your light to make others comfortable in their darkness. There's something radical about this, the idea that your loneliness might be temporary, discomfort pointing you toward permanent alignment. We're so afraid of being alone that we'll crowd ourselves into spaces that diminish us, surround ourselves with people who don't see us, just to avoid the echo of our own footsteps. But I'm telling you, that echo? That's not emptiness. That's clarity. That's the sound of your life making room for what actually belongs there. I once worked with a woman who described her social life as a full calendar and an empty heart. Every weekend booked, every evening accounted for, surrounded by people who knew her name but nothing about her soul. She said, "I'm never alone, but I'm always lonely." And isn't that the cruelest irony? You can be drowning in company and still gasping for connection. The shift happened when she started asking a different question. Not, how do I find my people, but how do I become someone my people would recognize? Because here's what we miss. Authentic connection requires an authentic self. You can't find your tribe while wearing a mask. They'll connect with the mask, not with you, and you'll still feel alone in a crowded room. So she started small. She stopped accepting every invitation out of obligation. She started speaking her actual opinions, not the softened versions designed to keep peace. She shared her weird interests, her unconventional thoughts, the parts of herself she'd been hiding because they didn't fit the group aesthetic. And yes, some people drifted away. Some friendships revealed themselves as acquaintanceships held together by convenience rather than connection. It hurt. She had moments of panic, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake, if she should apologize and squeeze herself back into those old, uncomfortable spaces. But then something remarkable happened. The emptiness she'd created became an invitation. People she'd never noticed before started appearing. People who resonated with her actual frequency, not the false signal she'd been broadcasting. Conversations deepened. Laughter felt genuine. Silence became comfortable instead of awkward. She told me, "I have fewer friends now, but I'm not lonely anymore. I'd rather have 3 people who know me than 30 who don't." The truth is, we've been conditioned to believe that saying yes makes us good people, that declining an invitation makes us difficult, that protecting our energy is somehow selfish. But I've watched too many people collapse under the weight of obligations they never truly wanted to carry. There's a woman I know who spent years volunteering for every committee, every fundraiser, every neighborhood project. She wore her busyness like a badge of honor. Then one day, her body simply refused to cooperate anymore. The fatigue wasn't just physical, it was existential. Her soul was sending her a message she'd ignored for decades. During her recovery, she learned something radical. Her worth wasn't tied to her usefulness. She didn't have to earn her place at the table by perpetually serving everyone else. And when she finally started saying no, gently, firmly, without lengthy explanations, something surprising happened. The people who truly cared about her respected it. The ones who didn't, they revealed themselves. That's the thing about boundaries. They're like a filter. They let the real relationships through while keeping the extractive ones at bay. I want you to understand that setting boundaries doesn't mean building walls. It means creating doors that you control. You decide who enters, when they enter, and under what conditions. This isn't cruelty. It's stewardship. You're the guardian of your own life force. Think about the people who drain you. I don't mean the ones going through temporary hardship. We all need support sometimes. I mean the ones who treat your energy like an all-you-can-eat buffet. The ones who only call when they need something. The ones who disregard your time, dismiss your feelings, and disappear when you're the one in need. You don't owe them unlimited access to you. You really don't. And the guilt you feel when you pull back? That's not your intuition talking. That's old programming. That's the voice of every person who benefited from your lack of boundaries, telling you to stay small and accommodating. Here's what I've learned. The people who get angry when you set boundaries are the exact people who benefited from you having none. They weren't upset because you changed. They were upset because they could no longer use you. And that revelation, as painful as it might be, is also profoundly liberating. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you understand that their anger is actually evidence that your boundary was necessary, their disapproval loses its power over you. I worked with a woman who finally told her adult children that she would no longer be providing free childcare 5 days a week. She was exhausted, her health was suffering, and she had her own dreams she'd been postponing for years. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Her daughter stopped speaking to her. Her son accused her of being selfish and not caring about her grandchildren. They made her feel like the villain in a story where she was simply trying to survive. But here's what shifted everything for her. She realized that in 30 years of parenting and 10 years of grandparenting, not once had anyone asked her what she needed. Not once had her exhaustion been considered as important as their convenience. Their anger wasn't about love or family values. It was about the loss of free labor. And once she saw that clearly, she stopped apologizing. She stopped explaining. She simply repeated her boundary and let their reaction be their problem, not hers. This is the work, you see. Not just setting the boundary, but holding it when the pressure comes. Not just saying no, but refusing to be manipulated by the emotional fallout that follows. Because they will try everything. They'll guilt you. They'll gaslight you. They'll tell you that you've changed, that you're not yourself, that they're just worried about you. They'll recruit others to their cause, creating a chorus of voices, all telling you that your boundary is unreasonable. And here's what I need you to understand. This is a test of your conviction. This is where you find out what you're really made of. Because when everyone around you is telling you that you're wrong, when the people you love most are treating you like you've lost your mind, it takes tremendous strength to hold your ground. But you must hold it. Because what they're really saying is, your needs are less important than our comfort. Your growth is less important than our familiarity. Your truth is less important than our version of who you should be. And that, my friend, is not love. That's control dressed up in concern. I've watched people fold under this pressure. I've seen them apologize for boundaries that were perfectly reasonable. I've watched them shrink back into old patterns because standing alone felt too frightening, too lonely, too hard. And do you know what happens to them? They wither. Something inside them, that spark of self-respect, that flame of authentic living, it begins to dim. They tell themselves it's easier this way, that keeping the peace is worth the price. But the price is always higher than they realize. The price is themselves. So, when you set that boundary and the pushback comes, and it will come, I want you to remember something. Their reaction is not evidence that your boundary is wrong. Their discomfort is not proof that you've made a mistake. Their reaction is simply information. It's showing you how much they've benefited from your boundarylessness. It's revealing how much they've relied on your flexibility, your accommodation, your willingness to shrink. And now that you're refusing to shrink anymore, they're panicking. Let them panic. Your job is not to manage their emotions. Your job is not to make this comfortable for them. Your job is to stay true to the decision you've made, to honor the self-respect you're cultivating, to protect the life you're trying to build. Because here's what happens when you hold firm. Eventually, people adjust. Not always, not everyone. But the ones who truly care about you, the ones who are capable of healthy relationship, they recalibrate. They learn that this is the new reality. They discover that they can respect your limits and still have connection with you. And the ones who can't, the ones who only wanted you on their terms, you learn to live without them. And that loss, as painful as it may be, creates space for something far more valuable. People who love you as you actually are, not as they need you to be. You realize that the people who truly matter don't require you to be smaller, quieter, or more convenient. They don't need you to apologize for taking up space or for having needs of your own. They celebrate your growth instead of feeling threatened by it. They meet your honesty with honesty, your vulnerability with respect. And here's what changes everything. You begin to attract these people naturally, not because you're performing perfectly, but because you're finally being authentic. When you stop pretending, you become a magnet for others who've also stopped pretending. When you set boundaries, you attract people who respect boundaries. When you honor your own needs, you connect with people who understand that relationships aren't about self-erasure. The energy you once spent maintaining false versions of yourself becomes available for genuine connection. The anxiety you felt, trying to read minds and anticipate reactions, dissolves because you're simply present, simply honest. You discover that real intimacy doesn't happen in spite of boundaries, it happens because of them. You also learn something unexpected. People-pleasing wasn't just hurting you, it was actually disrespecting the people around you. Every time you said yes when you meant no, you denied them the opportunity to know the real you. Every time you hid your truth to avoid their discomfort, you treated them like fragile children instead of capable adults. Every time you twisted yourself into shapes to fit their expectations, you robbed them of an authentic relationship. True respect means trusting people with your truth. It means believing they can handle your boundaries, your needs, your authentic self. And if they can't, that's information. That's clarity. That's not a failure on your part, it's a revelation about the relationship's true capacity. You begin to see that the people who make you feel guilty for having boundaries are often the ones who benefited most from your lack of them. The ones who call you selfish for prioritizing your well-being are usually the ones who took advantage of your selflessness. Their resistance to your growth isn't about your character, it's about their comfort being disrupted. And here's what nobody tells you about this realization. It doesn't have to make you bitter. It can make you clear. Crystal clear about who you're becoming and what you'll no longer tolerate. When you stop explaining yourself to people who are determined to misunderstand you, something shifts. You reclaim energy you didn't even know you were losing. All those rehearsed conversations in your head, the preemptive defenses, the constant justifications, they dissolve. You realize that your choices don't require a jury. Your boundaries don't need unanimous approval. I've watched people transform the moment they grasped this truth. They stopped posting explanations on social media about why they couldn't attend every event. They stopped writing paragraph-long text messages defending their decisions. They simply said, "I won't be able to make it," and left it at that. And the sky didn't fall. Relationships that were real remained. Connections built on manipulation faded. The sorting happened naturally. This is the part where you learn that disappointing others isn't cruelty, it's honesty. It's saying, "I can't pour from an empty cup," and meaning it. It's recognizing that you've been treating everyone else's comfort as sacred while treating your own as negotiable, and deciding that equation no longer works. The people who truly love you will adjust. They might stumble at first, confused by this version of you who no longer bends into impossible shapes. But if the foundation is genuine, they'll recalibrate. They'll learn that no doesn't mean I don't love you, it means I'm learning to love myself too. And those who can't adjust, those who keep pushing, testing, demanding proof of your loyalty through self-sacrifice, they're showing you exactly who they are. Believe them. Not with anger, but with clarity. Not with resentment, but with the quiet understanding that not everyone is meant to walk with you into this next chapter. And here's what I know to be true. What I've seen proven again and again in my own life and in the lives of those I've counseled. The moment you accept this truth, the moment you stop forcing connections that have expired, something miraculous happens. Space opens up. Not empty space, not lonely space, but sacred space. The kind of space where new relationships can take root, where people who are aligned with your evolution can find you, where connections based on who you're becoming, not who you used to be, can flourish. I've watched it happen so many times. The woman who finally stopped trying to maintain friendships that drained her discovered a community of women who celebrated her growth. The man who released his need to be understood by his old circle found mentors who saw his potential immediately. The couple who stopped forcing compatibility with friends who undermined their relationship attracted couples who inspired them. The universe abhors a vacuum, but it also honors boundaries. When you make space, when you release what's no longer serving you, you're not just removing something. You're declaring something. You're announcing to the universe, I am ready for what matches this new frequency. I am available for relationships that reflect my current truth. And the universe always responds to such declarations. But you must trust the transition. You must be willing to walk through that season where your circle gets smaller before it expands again. Where Saturday nights might be quieter, where your phone buzzes less frequently, where you're learning to be comfortable in your own company, in your own knowing, without the constant validation of a crowd that no longer sees you clearly. This is not loss. This is refinement. This is the necessary pruning that every growing thing experiences. The gardener doesn't mourn the branches she cuts away. She knows she's directing the plant's energy toward more fruitful growth. You are that plant, and you are also that gardener. You have both the wisdom to know what must be released and the power to make that release with intention. Some people will judge you for this. They'll call you different, changed, too much. They'll say you've outgrown yourself, as if that were possible, as if evolution were a crime. Let them. Their discomfort with your growth is not your responsibility to manage. Your only responsibility is to keep walking your path with integrity and love, to honor the voice within that called you forward in the first place. That voice doesn't fade because someone else can't hear it. It doesn't diminish because others choose not to listen to their own. I've watched people tie themselves in knots trying to prove they're still the same person they were before their awakening. They apologize for their boundaries. They shrink their vocabulary. They hide their books, dim their light, pretend they haven't seen what they've seen, and for what? To make others comfortable with staying asleep? There's a difference between humility and self-betrayal. Humility says, I'm still learning, still growing, still imperfect. Self-betrayal says, I'll pretend I haven't learned anything so you won't feel uncomfortable. One is grace, the other is violence against your own soul. You don't owe anyone access to the new rooms you've discovered in your consciousness. You don't need to give tours of your inner temple to people who'd only vandalize the walls with their skepticism. Some spaces are sacred, some transformations are private, some truths are pearls, and we're instructed clearly about where not to cast them. This doesn't make you elitist. It makes you wise. There's a season for sharing and a season for protecting what's tender and new. A gardener doesn't invite everyone to trample through the seedlings. She waits until the roots are strong, until the plants can withstand the elements. Your transformation is still taking root. Give it time, give it protection, give it the silence and space it needs to become unshakable. Then, when you're ready, when you're rooted deeply enough that no storm of opinion can uproot you, share if you feel called, but share from overflow, not from a need to justify yourself. And if the sharing never comes, if you're meant to simply live your transformation rather than broadcast it, that's equally valid. Not everyone is meant to teach. Some are meant to simply be living proof that another way exists. Your life itself becomes the testimony. Your peace becomes the invitation. Your joy becomes the evidence that cannot be argued with.